Hi, welcome to the channel. My name's Dr. Claire Killingback and I'm a senior lecturer in physiotherapy. In this video, I'm going to talk through how to pass an interview to get onto a physio degree course in the UK. Now, it's worth me pointing out, I have interviewed hundreds of potential physiotherapy students over the years. So what I'm going to try and do is give you some of the top tips for success and distill down, some of the things that I've seen as being best practice with those potential physio students. And I'll also talk through what you can expect from the different types of physiotherapy interviews that you may be encountering at the universities that you apply to. I'm going to start by talking about something called values-based recruitment, because that's the way that universities recruit their healthcare students. But to explain that, I need to backtrack a few years to something called the Francis Report. Being aware of the Francis Report is really important interview prep, so please don't skip over this bit. The Francis Report was published in 2013 and it was written following an inquiry led by someone called Sir Robert Francis. And he was a British barrister and he specialised in medical law and clinical negligence. And he was tasked by the government to investigate concerns that happened between 2005 and 2009 at one of the Mid-Staffordshire NHS hospital trusts. And when you read some of the stories of what was happening in this trust, it really is heartbreaking. So, for example, there were patients who couldn't get drinking water, and so they were so thirsty they were having to drink the water from the vases that their flowers were in. There were babies who had dummies taped over their faces to stop them from crying. There were really high mortality rates, really poor care, and relatives that tried to raise concerns about that were either ignored or they were kind of told off for complaining about things. Staff who raised concerns, like we talk about this as whistleblowing, so staff who raised concerns were either bullied or, they ended up having to leave the job because just no one would listen to them. So it was the NHS Trust was in such a poor way. So this inquiry, which took a number of years to carry out, led to a number of changes or recommendations, around how to improve it and how to make sure things like that never happen again. And one of the things that came out of that inquiry was the importance of recruiting staff that not only have the academic ability and the competencies to do a healthcare job, but actually staff that have the right values to be doing that job. And so if you were going to be recruiting staff to the NHS with those values, they take a process called values-based recruitment. And if you think about the fact that, as a healthcare student, you're then going to go on to get a job in the NHS, it's obviously really important that universities are also recruiting students based on the values that they have. And so pretty much any interview you go to, no matter what format it is in the UK, it will be following a values-based recruitment approach. So my first top tip for success for a physiotherapy interview is make sure you are aware of the Francis Report. You don't need to have read the whole thing and know it inside out, but you need to be aware that it exists and why that's important. So that's number one, be aware of the Francis Report. And so because of that Francis Report, universities are looking to recruit students with the right values. Now, values are important because they determine our behaviour, and then that will affect what kind of patient experience and patient care we provide. So universities will really be looking and asking questions around, let me explore the values that this person has. Do they have the right values? Particularly, do they have the right values to meet what's called the NHS Constitution? So the NHS Constitution is made up of 6 different principles, really, and those things are around the values of working together for patients, the importance of respect and dignity, a commitment to quality of care. It's also really concerned around compassion, making sure that healthcare improves lives and that everyone counts. So that's my second top tip really for interview prep, is make sure you're aware of the NHS Constitution and think about how you might be answering some of those questions around your values on compassion and team working and making sure everyone counts. So whichever format your university interview takes place, you can be sure they'll be looking at your values. I'm just going to talk through now the 3 main types of interview that you could have. So it might be that you have an individual interview, you could have a group interview, or you could have something that's called an MMI, which is a multiple mini interview. So let's start with talking about individual interviews. An individual interview could be carried out on a 1-to-1 basis, or it could be on a 2-to-1 basis. So if it's a 1-to-1, it's probably just going to be you and the physiotherapy lecturer. If there's a second person there, they're likely to be either what we call a practice educator, i.e. a physiotherapist who works in clinical practice and has students on placements. The other person that could be there is someone called a service user and carer. So that is someone who has experienced physiotherapy firsthand or is a carer for someone who's experienced physiotherapy. So those are the kind of people that would be there for an individual interview. In terms of the format, they will probably work through a list of questions that they want to ask you about. If you want to know what some of those questions are, actually, to be honest, all you need to do is just Google physiotherapy interview questions, and there'll be a number of websites that come up that have a whole heap of questions that you can look through. And actually, the questions are pretty good. So do make sure you Google that and use those to be preparing. I know when I start my interviews, I always want to bring out the best in a candidate. Like, you're going to be nervous when you're doing an interview. That's completely normal. That's okay. We take nerves into account. But I feel like my job as the interviewer is to put that person at ease so that I see the best of them, not necessarily the worst of them. So I'll probably always open up with just a kind of really simple warm-up type question, which will be something like, tell me about yourself and why you want to be a physiotherapist. So make sure you've prepped that answer really well, because actually if you get your first answer out quite confidently and you're like, oh, okay, that went well, your nerves will just settle and you'll get into your groove with the rest of the interview. So that's generally what will happen with an individual interview. So my next top tip for preparing for interviews, and this is no matter whether it's, individual, group, multiple, mini, is when you've got those list of questions from Google, have a read of them and then make sure you practice answering those questions out loud. Don't just think through the answer in your head, because you'll be quite fluent in your head as you're like, oh, I'd say this, I'd say that. Actually speak it out. You may feel a little bit silly doing it, but it's a really important skill to master. And as you speak it out, you'll be a bit more like, what do I say here? That's okay, but because as you work out the answers, as you keep speaking them out, you'll get better, you'll get more fluent, you'll just get more confident with it. So that's my next top tip. Speak out the answers to those questions. Don't just think them through in your head. Now, it may also be that you have a group interview. Group interviews will still be taking a values-based recruitment approach. However, it's that opportunity for you to demonstrate your team working and your communication skills with other people a lot more clearly. The format from the group interview can vary. So it might be that as a whole group, you'll watch a video about something. Normally it's about something to do with communication in an NHS situation, and you'll see it and you're like, oh yeah, that went well in the video, that didn't go so well in the video. So you're kind of mentally making a note of all of those things. And then as part of the group interview, they'll probably get you into smaller groups and say, okay, can you just discuss what the strengths and weaknesses were in the communication with that video, for example? And then that's your opportunity to share your learning from what you saw from the video. The other way sometimes group interviews happen is they actually might get you to do a group interview task together. So they might say, okay, here's a big piece of paper, draw as a team what you think would be the important attributes needed to be a physiotherapist and the values required. And then they'd probably get you to talk through as a group your poster and what you've created. So it's another nice way of just demonstrating, as I said, teamworking and communication. I think I've probably got two top tips really if you end up having a group interview. My first top tip is be yourself. Okay, so you have got to this interview on the merit of your personal statement and your application. So they already see a great strength in you there. So, be yourself, bring your personality, bring your uniqueness to that interview. I know it's easier said than done when you're nervous, but as much as you can, be yourself in that interview. My second tip really is understanding, group interviews can be a really pressured situation because all of a sudden it's not just dealing with your nerves, you're actually thinking, oh, I've got to compete with all of these other people for a limited number of places. So as much as possible, you definitely need to speak out and say something, because if you don't say anything at all, that kind of shows some challenges with communication, but we still understand students will be nervous. But it's about getting that balance, because you want to listen to what your peers are saying and then you want to try and build on what they're saying. But you want to do this in a really respectful way. So I guess my tip is just be respectful of everyone else who's being interviewed. And actually, if you're sat there and all these other people are dominating and you're like, oh, I know I need to say something, but I can't get a word in edgeways, just use your body language or a gesture, like put your hand up or say, oh, can I just say something there? Because you do need to push yourself a little bit with that. You might not necessarily feel super confident, but what you need in that situation is just be courageous and try and get yourself that opportunity to talk, so that you can share all the good things that that you have inside you, that you can be demonstrating that, yes, you have this ability to communicate well with patients. The third type of interview you could have is called a multiple mini interview, or an MMI. And it's worth me saying you'll know what type of interview you're going to have in advance, because a university will normally send out an information pack over email or through their university portal. Please make sure you read that information so that you're as prepared as you possibly can be. And the format of a multiple mini interview is generally that there'll be a number of stations that you'll rotate around. There'll be a different assessor at each station, and each station will be looking for a slightly different thing. So they might be asking you, a values-based question. They might be getting you to watch a short video and then share your thoughts about that. They might ask you to reflect on a time when you had to overcome a difficult situation, and what did you learn from that experience? It might be that there's a practical task that they ask you to do. But what's good to remember is actually, because there's different assessors at each of those stations, you might be at a station and think, I just stuffed that up, that I didn't come across well, that wasn't me at my best. So what you have to do is mentally kind of draw a line under that station, move on to the next one, and you'll have another opportunity there to demonstrate your skills. So in that sense, multiple mini interviews can be quite a helpful way for you to just experience a whole range of ways of showing yourself at your best. Some universities will do their interviews face-to-face, and other universities will do their interviews online, so over something like Teams or Zoom. So if it's a face-to-face interview, if you're travelling to the university for that interview, please make sure you get there with plenty of time, that you looked at the travel journey, all of those sorts of things, because what you don't want to have happen is to end up rushing there or being a few minutes late. That will just put your stress levels up even higher. So really plan that journey well, and when you get to the university, make sure you find the room that you're going to be in. University campuses can sometimes be quite big and difficult to navigate, so find where you're going to be, and actually if you've got extra time, go for a little wander around the university before your interview starts, just to get a bit of a feel for what it might be like to study in that particular place. If you're doing a face-to-face interview, please make sure you remember to bring a bottle of water with you. I know when I get nervous, my mouth completely dries up, so having water there, it's a really simple thing, but have a drink and then it just helps you keep going. Make sure you've got a contact number for the university as well, because it might be that actually with all of that planning and preparation, you get stuck in a massive traffic jam on the way there and you are going to be late. But if that happens, just pick up the phone, give them a call, explain the situation. They will be so grateful that you've communicated. That's a professional thing to be doing. So make sure you've got the telephone number handy for the person you would need to contact about that. And then the obvious thing, think about your dress code. I would probably say go smart casual. So you don't want to be mega smart, but you also don't want to be really casual. So try and get that balance right with your dress code and what you're going to be wearing. Alternatively, you might find that your interview is happening online, so Teams, Zoom, something like that. So my top tips for that really are, make sure that you have got that right software and you've got it downloaded, and do a test call with your friends or family before you even get to that interview, just to make sure that, it's working okay on your phone or your laptop. What you don't want to have happen is, get to that interview, click and be like, oh, my sound doesn't work, or this is muted. Again, it's not necessarily an issue. It can normally be overcome. The lecturer will normally be able to talk you through it and help you figure out how to get that tech working. But at the same time, you just don't want to add to your stress, do you? So test all the technology before you even get to having the interview. Make sure you're doing the call from a quiet place. We have students that we interview that will sometimes, have to do it from the library at their school or college. That's completely fine. Just make sure it's quiet, it's away from distractions. Put your mobile phone away if you're doing it on a laptop and not doing the interview from your phone, so that distraction just isn't there. As far as possible, think about the background from what you're looking at. So it might be in your bedroom, you've got, all these fun posters, music posters, whatever it is. Actually, for a professional interview, maybe it's better if you kind of sit at your dining room table and there's a blank wall behind you. So think again about that backdrop. I know it's the basic things, but it all helps to make that good impression. And again, even if you're doing an interview over online, still think about what you're wearing. You top dress, but dress smart on top. And if you've got a shirt or something that needs ironing, please make sure it's ironed. It's a simple thing, but it just gives a bad impression if someone's like, oh, they've pulled a shirt out of the cupboard, but they didn't bother to iron it. So make sure all those simple things are covered. So that's a bit of a summary on the different types of interview you might have and some top tips for what you can be doing to be preparing. I'm going to do a part 2 video where I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about some of the specifics around preparing to answer questions and other things that I've noted for where students have been successful. So I hope this was helpful, and please watch out for part 2.